Admiral Kim Dae-ho walked slowly into the massive council chambers on Nexus Prime Station. His black military uniform felt heavy on his shoulders, and his worn boots echoed against the polished crystal floor. Around him, tall towers reached toward the ceiling, each one filled with alien representatives who looked down at the humans below. The chamber was beautiful but cold. Soft blue lights danced across the walls, and the air smelled of strange flowers from a dozen different worlds. But Kim could feel the tension in the room like electricity before a storm. For 200 years, humans had served the Galactic Council. They fought the wars that others would not fight. They built the space stations that others could not build. They died protecting worlds that others would not defend. Yet here in these crystal towers, humans were treated like servants. Captain Lee Min-ho stood beside Kim, his jaw tight with anger. 3 months ago, Lee had discovered the Kepler Nebula while running from enemy ships. The nebula was full of rare metals and energy crystals worth more than most star systems. For 50 years, Commander Park Ji-woo had led human fleets to protect that region. Thousands of human soldiers had died, keeping those mining stations safe. Now the council wanted to take it all away. Council Speaker Three Necks rose from his high seat, his 4 purple arms spreading wide. He was tall and thin, with skin that changed colors when he spoke. Behind him sat dozens of other alien leaders. The proud Veltar with their golden robes, the bug-like Zephyrians clicking their mandibles, and the floating ethereals who glowed with inner light. The matter of the Kepler Nebula mining rights has been decided, Three Necks announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. The Veltar Empire shall assume control of all operations in that sector. Kim felt his hands tighten into fists. The Veltar had done nothing to earn those rights. They had sent no ships to fight the raiders. They had built no defenses. They had lost no people. All they had done was make speeches and trade favors with other council members. Speaker Three Necks, Kim said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the steel underneath. Humanity discovered that region. We have protected it for 5 decades. Our people have died for it. What claim do the Veltar have? A ripple of whispers went through the chamber. Some aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others looked annoyed that a human would dare question the council's decision. Three Necks' skin turned a dark red color. Admiral Kim, your species served the council as warriors. You fight where we tell you to fight. You build what we tell you to build. But matters of policy and resource allocation are for more developed minds. The insult hit Kim like a physical blow. Around him, other human officers stiffened. Lieutenant Colonel Yoon Hae-jin took a step forward, his hand moving toward his weapon. Kim raised a hand to stop him. More developed minds? Kim repeated quietly. Indeed. Three Necks continued, warming to his subject. Humans excel at violence and manual labor. These are useful talents. But governance requires intelligence, subtlety, long-term thinking. Leave such matters to species better equipped for civilization. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the aliens seemed to sense they had gone too far. But Three Necks was not finished. The Veltar will manage the Kepler Nebula efficiently and profitably. Human military units will continue to provide security, naturally. You should be honored to serve in such capacity. Kim stared up at the council speaker for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small golden badge, the insignia that marked him as humanity's representative to the council. He looked at it for a moment, remembering the day he had first received it 20 years ago. Back then, he had believed the council represented something noble. Slowly, deliberately, Kim placed the badge on the crystal floor in front of Three Necks' podium. The sound it made when it hit was very small, but somehow every being in the chamber heard it clearly. For 2 centuries, Kim said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room, humanity has bled for this council. We have been your sword and your shield. We have protected your trade routes, built your stations, and died for your ideals. We did this because we believed in something greater than ourselves. He paused, looking around at the alien faces staring down at him. Some looked worried now. Others still seemed annoyed. But we were wrong, Kim continued. There is nothing greater here. Only greed wearing the mask of civilization. Only cowardice hidden behind pretty words. Threenex's skin turned almost black. Admiral Kim, you forget yourself. Humanity's membership in this council is hereby terminated. Kim finished. The Human Federation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Some aliens stood up from their seats. Others activated communication devices, probably calling their governments. But Kim ignored them all. He turned to face his human officers. Colonel Yoon, signal all human forces. Begin Exodus protocol. Sir, Yoon asked, though his smile suggested he understood perfectly. Every ship, every station, every outpost. We're going home. As Kim walked toward the chamber's exit, Threenex called after him desperately. You cannot do this. The galaxy needs human military support. There are treaties, agreements. Kim stopped at the doorway and looked back one final time. You called us warriors, not thinkers. Perhaps you should have thought about that before you decided you didn't need us. As the massive doors closed behind the human delegation, Kim's final words echoed in the crystal chamber. We will remember who stood with us today, and we will remember who did not. Captain Oh Sung-min stood on the bridge of his engineering ship, watching the Veltar homeworld spin slowly below. The massive space elevator that connected the planet to its orbital station stretched like a silver thread across the darkness. For 30 years, human engineers had kept that elevator running. Today, that would end. 6 months had passed since Admiral Kim walked out of the council chambers. 6 months since humanity had declared its independence from the galactic government that treated them like servants. Now it was time to show the galaxy what that really meant. Captain, said Chief Engineer Choi Baram, looking up from her control panel. I'm getting emergency calls from the Veltar surface. They want to know why the elevator is slowing down. Oh smiled grimly. Tell them the truth. We're shutting it down. The elevator was just the beginning. All across council space, human crews were leaving their posts. Every space station humanity had built, every defense platform they had installed, every piece of technology they had designed and maintained for 2 centuries. All of it was being abandoned. Choi opened a communication channel to the frantic Veltar officials on the planet below. Their translated voices filled the bridge, high-pitched with panic. Human engineers, you must not leave. The elevator requires constant maintenance. Without your quantum processors, the whole system will fail. Choi's voice remained perfectly professional. Our maintenance contract ended when humanity left the council. You wanted independence from human involvement. Now you have it. But we don't know how to operate your systems. Perhaps you should have learned, Choi replied, and closed the channel. 3 star systems away, Major Lee Hyun-woo was overseeing the evacuation of Andorian Defense Platform 7. The massive station had protected the Ethereal Collective's archive worlds for over a century. Its shield generators could stop entire fleets. But those shields required human-designed control systems that no other species understood. Lee's soldiers moved quickly through the station corridors, packing up equipment and data files. Everything humanity had built, they would take with them. What they left behind would be useless metal and empty rooms. Sir, called Sergeant Park Minho, the Ethereals are requesting a meeting. They want to discuss our departure. Lee shook his head. No meetings. No negotiations. We're leaving, and that's final. On the medical station orbiting Zephyr Prime, Dr. Song Eun-ji was deleting decades of research data. The Zephyrians were an insect-like species that shared thoughts through a hive mind. But their quantum communication networks needed constant updates and repairs that only human technicians knew how to perform. As Dr. Song wiped the last medical files from the central computer, she felt a moment of sadness. This research had saved millions of alien lives. New medicines, surgical techniques, treatments for diseases that had plagued various species for centuries. All of it would be lost. But the Zephyrians had stood silent in the council chambers when humanity was insulted. They had done nothing when human mining rights were stolen. They had chosen their side. A young technician named Kim Ji-won approached her workstation. Doctor, the Zephyrians are offering to triple our salaries if we stay. Too late, Song replied, closing the final data file. They had 200 years to show us respect. They chose to show us contempt instead. The evacuation was happening everywhere at once. Human colonies in council space began loading their people onto transport ships. Families that had lived on alien world for generations packed their belongings and said goodbye to homes they would never see again. Fleet Admiral Park Soo-Jin coordinated the massive operation from her flagship, the Soul's Pride. Her fleet of 300 ships was spread across 50 star systems, all working together to bring humanity home. It was the largest evacuation in galactic history. Admiral, reported her communications officer, we're getting calls from dozens of council worlds. They're begging us to reconsider. Any offers of genuine partnership? Park asked. No, sir. Just promises of better pay and working conditions. They still want us to be their servants, just better treated servants. Park nodded. She had expected nothing else. The council species would never see humans as equals. To them, humans would always be the muscle, never the brain. The Veltar space elevator finally shut down completely, stranding millions of tons of cargo in orbit. Emergency shuttles tried to maintain basic supply runs, but they could barely handle 1% of normal traffic. The planet's industrial economy began collapsing within days. On Nexus Prime, the great council station that had been the center of galactic government for 1,000 years, human technicians began their final shutdown procedures. The station's main power grid, life support systems, and defensive shields all depended on human engineering. Without constant maintenance, the entire station would become uninhabitable within months. Council Speaker 3nex called emergency session after emergency session, but there was nothing to discuss. Humanity was leaving, and there was no force in the galaxy that could stop them. The Council had spent 2 centuries making sure that human military might serve their interests. They had never considered what would happen if humanity simply walked away. As the last human transport ship prepared to leave Council space, Admiral Park Soo-Jin broadcast a final message to the galaxy. Her words were simple and final. For 200 years, we built your civilization. We protected your peace. We died for your dreams. You repaid us with insults and theft. Now you will learn what the galaxy looks like without humanity watching over it. The transmission ended. The human ships jumped to hyperspace. And behind them, the greatest civilization in the galaxy's history began its slow collapse into darkness. The Council had gotten exactly what they asked for. They were finally free of humanity's influence. They would soon discover that freedom had a price they could not afford to pay. Dr. Kong So-young pressed her face against the observation window of Research Station Haven's Rest, watching in horror as the darkness consumed everything. The Devourer swarm moved like a living shadow across the stars, their bioships eating entire asteroids and leaving nothing but empty space behind. 1 year had passed since humanity abandoned the galaxy. 1 year since the last human engineer shut down the defense platforms and walked away. Now Dr. Kong understood what that abandonment really meant. The Devourers had been quiet for centuries, held back by human battle fleets in the outer regions of space. Without those fleets patrolling the borders, the ancient enemy had awakened hungry and angry. They poured to the Kepler Nebula like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Doctor, called her assistant, a young Veltar scientist named Kexthon. I'm receiving distress calls from the mining platforms. The creatures they're eating the stations whole. Kong closed her eyes. She had tried to warn the Council months ago. The Devourers were not just pirates or raiders. They were something older and more terrible, a species that consumed all organic matter and turned into more themselves. Only constant military pressure had kept them contained. 3 sectors away, Commander Nam Ju-hyuk fought a hopeless battle with his small patrol fleet. His 12 ships faced a devourer swarm of over 200 biovessels. Each enemy ship was alive, covered in teeth and tentacles that could rip through steel like paper. All ships, fall back to the Centauri Gate. Nam shouted into his communicator. We cannot hold them here. But there was nowhere to run. The Devourers had already consumed the gate station and its human-built navigation systems. Nam's ships were trapped in a system with no way out and an enemy that never stopped coming. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Cho-Un-Soo looked up from her console with fear in her eyes. "Sir, our plasma cannons are barely scratching them. These things heal faster than we can hurt them." Nam remembered the old reports from human fleet commanders. The Devourers could only be stopped by massive coordinated attacks that destroyed them faster than they could regenerate, that required the kind of firepower that only human battle groups possessed. The Veltar had inherited control of this sector when humanity left. They had promised to protect it with their superior intellect and advanced technology. Where were they now? On the Zephyrian core world, Hive Queen Zexora experienced something her species had not felt in 1,000 years. Loneliness. Sections of the great hive mind were going silent, cut off from the quantum networks that connected all Zephyrian thoughts. The networks had been designed by human scientists and maintained by human technicians. Without constant updates and repairs, the quantum computers were failing one by one. Entire hive clusters were becoming isolated, their billions of voices suddenly trapped in individual minds. For a species that shared every thought and emotion, this isolation was worse than death. Zextera felt pieces of her consciousness disappearing, like stars going dark. Soon, she might be the only Zephyrian left who remembered what it felt like to be part of something greater. The ethereal collective faced a different kind of disaster. Their ancient archive worlds, repositories of knowledge collected over millions of years, were falling to raiders and pirates. The human-installed defense grids that had protected these treasures for centuries had shut down when the last human technician left. Ethereal archivists Lumthara watched helplessly as crude pirate ships landed on the sacred world of Kethmora. Barbarian raiders from the Outer Rim were stealing artifacts that contained the wisdom of dead civilizations. Books that could never be replaced were being burned for fuel. Art that had survived the fall of empires was being melted down for scrap metal. The ethereals had always considered themselves above physical violence. They were beings of pure thought and energy, focused on preserving knowledge for future generations. They had relied on human military protection, while looking down on humans as violent primitives. Now their precious archives were burning, and there was nothing their great intelligence could do to stop it. In the council chambers on Nexus Prime, Speaker 3nex called another emergency session, but only half the seats were filled now. Dozens of member species had already fallen to various threats or disappeared entirely from galactic communication. "We must contact the humans again," 3nex said, his skin a sickly yellow color that showed his fear. "Offer them anything they want. Full council membership with voting rights, territory, resources, whatever it takes." Veltar Ambassador Crixnell shook his head sadly. "We have tried, Speaker. Our messages disappear into the void. Humanity has vanished completely. Our sensor networks cannot find a single human ship anywhere in known space." The truth was even worse than they knew. The mechanical synthesis had detected the weakening of galactic defenses and begun their own expansion. Ancient void rays stir in the darkness between stars, sensing opportunity in the growing chaos. Every threat that humanity had held in check for 2 centuries was now advancing at once. Without human fleets to patrol the borders, without human engineers to maintain the defenses, without human soldiers to fight the battles that no one else would fight, galactic civilization was collapsing like a house of cards. 3nex stared at the empty seats around him and finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. They had not just lost humanity's military support. They had lost the species that held everything together. In his private chambers at night, 3nex composed a final message to the void where humanity had vanished. His words were simple and desperate. "We were wrong. We need you. Please come back." The only answer was silence, and the darkness between the stars grew deeper. Dr. Lim Irin had given up hope 3 hours ago. Her research station Haven's Rest drifted helplessly in space, while a massive devourer swarm closed in from all directions. The bio-ships looked like giant insects made of metal and flesh, their tentacles reaching out hungrily toward her small station. "Doctor, we have maybe 20 minutes before they reach us," said her assistant, Technician Wong Dao-Su, his voice shaking with fear. "Should we send out a final message?" Lim looked around her laboratory at 30 years of research. Genetic samples from thousands of species, medical data that could save millions of lives. All of it would be consumed and lost forever when the Devourers arrived. Yes, she said quietly. Tell the galaxy what we discovered here. Maybe someone will remember. But as Wong began recording their final transmission, something impossible appeared on their sensors. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Not council ships. Lim had seen those before. These were different. The vessels moved like living things through space, their hulls flowing and changing shape as they flew. They were beautiful in a way that made her eyes water, as if her brain could not quite process what it was seeing. The ships seemed to be made of metal and light at the same time. My God, Wong whispered. What are those? Before Lim could answer, one of the strange ships opened a communication channel. The face that appeared on her screen was unmistakably human, but changed. Captain Ryu Jisung had Asian features she recognized, but his eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Strange symbols pulsed beneath his skin with soft blue light. Dr. Lim, he said, and his voice carried harmonics that made her bones vibrate. Haven's Rest contains genetic templates crucial to galactic biodiversity. We cannot permit their destruction. Who are you? Lim stammered. We are who we have always been, Ryu replied. We are simply more than we were before. The battle that followed lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Lim watched in amazement as the human ships danced through space like dolphins through water. Their weapons did not fire energy beams or missiles. Instead, they seemed to bend reality itself around the Devourer's swarm. One moment the bio ships were there, tentacles writhing and mandibles snapping. The next moment they were simply gone, dissolved into sparkling dust that drifted away on solar winds. The human ships moved without effort, turning impossible angles and traveling faster than light without entering hyperspace. When the last Devourer fell, Captain Ryu appeared on her station, not through a transport beam or shuttle. He simply walked to the wall as if it were not there. His physical form seemed solid, but Lim could sense vast energies moving beneath his human appearance. You're different, she said, stating the obvious because she could not think of anything else to say. We evolved, Ryu replied, examining her research equipment with interest. The council called us warriors, not thinkers. They were wrong about the second part. He touched one of her genetic samples, and the container began glowing with the same blue light that pulsed under his skin. Tell me, Doctor, what do you know about the predecessors? Lim blinked in surprise. The predecessors? They're a myth. A story about some ancient race that seeded the galaxy with life millions of years ago. Not a myth, Ryu said gently. We found them. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Found them? Where? How? Ryu gestured toward the stars visible through her laboratory window. They never left Dr. Lim. They simply moved beyond normal space-time, watching and waiting for a species that could evolve beyond its origins. He walked to her main computer and placed his hand on it. The screen filled with images that made no sense. Vast structures that existed in dimensions her mind could not grasp. Beings of pure energy that had once been biological. Technologies that treated the laws of physics as gentle suggestions rather than absolute rules. When humanity left council space, we did not run away in anger, Ryu explained. We followed signals we had detected years before. Signals that led us to the predecessor realm, between dimensions. But why you? Lim asked, why did they choose humans? Ryu's smile was both sad and infinitely compassionate. Because we could fight without hatred. Because we could explore without conquest. Because we could protect without demanding worship or gratitude. The images on her screen shifted to show humanity's transformation. Humans working alongside beings of living light. Human children playing in gardens that existed in 7 dimensions at once. Human scientists learning to manipulate the fundamental forces that held reality together. The predecessors have been waiting 3 million years for a species mature enough to join them, Ryu continued. Most civilizations destroy themselves before reaching that point. Others become too proud or too comfortable to grow. But humans were different. So you abandoned us, Lim said, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. No, Ryu replied firmly. We transcended. And now we can truly protect the galaxy instead of just fighting its symptoms. His ship's communication system activated, and Lim heard reports coming in from across the galaxy. Mysterious saviors appearing at dying worlds. Unknown fleets driving back pirates and raiders. Impossible technologies restoring failed systems and healing poisoned planets. We never left, Ryu said as he prepared to depart. We simply learned to see the bigger picture. And what we see coming will require everything we have learned. As his form began to fade back to the wall, Lim called out desperately, "Will you save us? Will humanity return to help the Council?" Ryu paused, looking back with eyes that held the weight of cosmic responsibility. The Council chose its path long ago, Dr. Lim, but the innocent should not suffer from the mistakes of the proud. He disappeared, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that humanity had not abandoned the galaxy after all. They had simply become something greater than anyone had ever imagined possible. Admiral Han Wu-jin stood on the bridge of his battle-scarred ship, watching death approach from 3 directions. The combined forces of devourers, synthesis machines, and ancient void wraiths surrounded Nexus Prime like a closing fist. This was where galactic civilization would make its final stand, in the same crystal chambers where humanity had once been dismissed as mere warriors. 3 years had passed since humanity's exodus. 3 years of watching the galaxy tear itself apart. Now every free world, every surviving species, every refugee fleet had gathered at the old Council Station for one last desperate battle. "Admiral," reported Captain Beck Jawan from the communication station, "we have maybe 6 hours before the enemy fleets reach firing range. The Veltar are requesting permission to surrender." Han laughed bitterly. Even now, facing extinction, some species still believe they can negotiate with pure destruction. The Devourers did not accept surrender. They only knew how to consume. The synthesis machine saw all biological life as a disease to be cured. The void wraiths were older than memory itself, creatures of living darkness that fed on the light of dying stars. "Tell the Veltar they can surrender if they want," Han said. "It won't save them, but they're free to try." Young Lieutenant Moon Seo-jin looked up from his sensor station with wide eyes. "Sir, I'm detecting spatial distortions near the edge of the system. Something big is coming through hyperspace." Han felt his heart skip. More enemies? They were already facing impossible odds. Any additional threat would turn their desperate last stand into a massacre. But what emerged from hyperspace was not another enemy fleet. Reality folded in on itself. Tearing open like fabric, through the dimensional rift came ships that defied every law of physics Han had ever learned. They moved like living poetry. Their hulls flowed between metal and pure energy. Some were small and elegant, dancing through space like butterflies. Others were massive beyond imagination, their surfaces covered in structures that existed in dimensions his eyes could not properly see. At the head of this impossible fleet came a vessel Han recognized, even though it had been transformed beyond all recognition. The Soul's Pride had been Fleet Admiral Park Soo-jin's flagship when humanity left. Now it looked like a cathedral made of crystallized starlight. A communication channel opened, and Park's face appeared on Han's screen. But like the ships, she had evolved into something magnificent and terrifying. Her eyes held the depth of black holes, and symbols of pure light moved beneath her skin like living tattoos. "Admiral Han," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond normal hearing. "You have fought well against impossible odds. But this battle is beyond the reach of conventional warfare." Around Nexus Prime, the evolved human fleet began to deploy. Han watched in awe as ships that seemed no larger than fighters somehow launched weapons that could crack planets. Reality bent and twisted as humanity's transcendent technology engaged enemies that had terrorized the galaxy for eons. The Devourers, ancient and hungry, found their bioships simply dissolving as human weapons unmade their molecular bonds. The synthesis machines, perfect and logical, discovered that their quantum computers could not process attacks that operated outside normal space-time. The void wraiths, older than civilizations, screamed in frequencies that shattered asteroids as human forces dragged them back into the light they had fled millions of years ago. But the most shocking moment came when Admiral Kim Dae-ho materialized in the council chambers themselves, not through transportation or teleportation. He simply stepped through dimensions as easily as walking through a door. The surviving council members, huddled together in their crystal towers, stared at him in amazement and terror. Kim had become something beyond human, but his essential nature remained unchanged. He moved with quiet authority, his presence filling the vast chamber with a sense of cosmic responsibility. When he spoke, his words reached every being in the dying galaxy simultaneously. "You cast us out because you believed we were lesser," Kim said, his voice containing the patience of geological time. "You were correct. We were lesser in wisdom, lesser in understanding of what true strength means." Speaker Threenecks, his skin now permanently pale with fear, fell to his knees. "Admiral Kim, we beg forgiveness. We were wrong about everything. Please save us." Kim looked at the alien leader with something that might have been pity. The predecessors taught us that real power lies not in conquest or domination. It lies in choosing to protect those who have wronged you, simply because protection is right. The battle in space reached its climax as humanity's evolved fleets systematically dismantled threats that had existed since before recorded history. But their victory came with conditions that would reshape galactic civilization forever. "The old council is ended," Kim announced. "Its hierarchy of superior and inferior species dies here. In its place rises something new, a partnership where all beings are valued for what they contribute, not for how long they have held power." Months later, former Speaker Threenecks found himself on New Haven, a human-protected agricultural world where refugees from across the galaxy were learning to build something better. He watched children from dozens of species playing together under alien suns, their laughter mixing in harmonies that no single species could create alone. Admiral Kim worked nearby in a garden containing flowers from 1,000 worlds, each bloom representing a species that had found sanctuary under humanity's protection. "Why?" Threenecks asked quietly, approaching the transcended human. "After everything we did, why protect us?" Kim looked up from his garden, his evolved eyes holding the weight of watching over an entire galaxy. "Because someone must choose to be wise when others choose to be foolish. Someone must choose protection when others choose exploitation. We finally learned what it means to be the adults in the room." As the story ended, humanity's fleets disappeared back into the deep void, not as conquerors seeking gratitude, but as eternal guardians ensuring that wisdom would guide the galaxy's future. The age of arrogance had died at Nexus Prime. The time of the new covenant had begun.